You see this right here? This right here is a directive from the FHFA. You don't need to sell your Bitcoin to secure a mortgage. That's likely what that means in the near future, because the director of the U.S. Federal Housing FHFA, which oversees Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, has now given this directive to review allowing people to hold their crypto in order to get a single family mortgage, which is huge. The government overseen enterprises, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, most people remember the 2008 financial crisis and the critical role that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac played in that. Well, adding Bitcoin to the mix in 2025 is probably nothing. The government agency regulates and oversees lenders to corporate banks, which then make mortgages. It's a massive multi-trillion-dollar market, and most debt is mortgage products. Cool numbers by you that I just calculated using Grok. But before we get to that, just think of how critical it is, where if you're bullish Bitcoin, forget the fart coin and all the other cryptos, which is frankly ridiculous. In this letter, it mentions cryptocurrency. It does not mention Bitcoin. It mentions cryptocurrency, and we know there's no second best. Bitcoin being perfect collateral makes sense. Solves a massive multi-trillion-dollar problem, especially for lenders that need security and need collateral. Because basically, when you take out a mortgage and it's a single family house, you're basically collateralizing the house itself. They're underwriting you as a borrower, your assets and your income. And the FHA, for example, will allow people very low deposits for first-time home buyers. And it's the government guaranteeing the debt so people can buy houses. And we've seen poor lending practices, again, back to 2008. But Bitcoin is perfect collateral. It can be instantly verified, held by multiple parties. Interesting to note that it says it would need to be on a centralized exchange. It says each enterprise is directed to consider only cryptocurrency assets that can be evidenced and stored on U.S. regulated centralized exchange, subject to all applicable laws. So that's interesting. Not your keys, not your coin. None of this is financial advice. Do your own research. This is big news, folks. The government regulator overseeing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is directing them to consider cryptocurrency assets as deposits. That's huge. If Bitcoin continues to have a compound annual growth rate of 35%, I asked Grok, how long would it take for that smaller deposit of 15%, low deposit, how long would it take for that low deposit to overgrow the value of the house? You're putting 15% down to buy a house. How long would it take for that 15% Bitcoin, which is continuing to compound annually with a growth rate of 35%, to be worth more than the house itself? And that's one of many reasons why I would be more interested in placing a deposit if I don't have to sell my asset, because Bitcoin is the apex asset. And it's demonetizing the real estate market. It's demonetizing equities. And it's like the black hole that can consume all of finance in many ways. It'll continue to grow against other assets being used as a hedge against inflation. Most people are buying houses as a store of value and investing in real estate to hedge against inflation. If you're interested in mining your own Bitcoin with Six, hit me up. You can efficiently stack Bitcoin at a lower cost basis than buying it spot if you're efficiently mining it every day through your own hardware. And many people take advantage of tax benefits like depreciation. It would take 9 years for your 15% deposit, compounding at 35%, to outgrow a house. It would take 9 years for the deposit to reach the original value of the home, not inflation adjusted. But how long for a 15% deposit to actually eclipse and outgrow the value of the home if the home were also growing in fiat denominated value? Let's say the home's growing at 9%, and if you place a 15% deposit growing at 35% compound annual growth rate, it would take 17 years. If I can place a deposit without selling it, even on an exchange, I would still consider it because you still have that exposure. It's interesting. You've seen this guy on Twitter. I tweeted a couple months ago about this happening in the background, but now we actually have a directive from the FHFA and Bill Pult directing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to consider and facilitate crypto deposits and credit worthiness from borrowers to allow people the American dream of owning a home. Drop in the comments whether you think coin is the American dream and whether you would buy a house if you could use a crypto asset Bitcoin deposit without having to sell your Bitcoin. This is the Bitcoin Miner Plug. Colby signing off. Appreciate you guys. Stay bullish.